Здравствуйте, welcome back to Russian Through Propaganda. Today is day 105, and our main topic today, again, more review, pronouns and special modifiers. So we're sort of mopping up the remaining details when it comes to just reviewing all of our case forms, and then tomorrow we'll transition to reviewing verbs, especially verb conjugation. So let's start with a quick painting. This is a rather rough painting by Ilya Repin, depicting Pushkin на лицейском экзамене в Царском селе, right? So this is a very young Pushkin, still a teenager at his public exam at the lycée, right? This famous school for aristocrats, which he joined right at its opening, right? He was I think he was in the very first year of students at the lycée, very prestigious. And here he's declaiming some of his poetry before an audience, including Derzhavin, who was a very well-known poet and a rather old man at that time. And we'll read some of his poetry later this year. Anyway, if we read the caption, «Молодой Пушкин учился в элитном императорском царско-сельском лицее в Царском селе». Right? The young Pushkin studied at the, what do you think elitny means? Take a wild guess. Elite. He studied at the elite Imperial Tsarsko-Selsky Lycée, right? And Tsarsko-Selsky is just an adjectival form of this name Tsarskoye Selo, which literally means Tsar's village. That's where this huge palace complex and also the Lycée, which is right next to the palace, actually attached to it. That's where the Lycée, this sort of high school, is located. На экзамене он прочитал свои стихи перед публикой. Right? At the exam, he read his poetry in front of the public, in front of an audience. Слушатели не верили своим ушам. His listeners couldn't believe their ears, right? Note how верить, if you recall, takes the dative, right? Они не верили своим ушам. Старый Державин слева, right? We see old Державин over to the left, слева. Сразу понял, что Pushkin станет великим поэтом. Right? He understood immediately that Pushkin literally will become a great poet. And there's that use of the instrumental after becoming, right? Он станет великим поэтом. Okay, so let's start today's review by reviewing quickly short form adjectives. Remember, we've reviewed the sort of ordinary adjectives, which are long form. And short form adjectives can be a bit of a tricky topic. We have to think somewhat in historical terms. If we go way back, to the dawn of Slavic or whatever, right? You had competing sets of endings. You had a set of noun endings, and then later you had a set of longer adjectival endings that began as pronoun forms. If you think of a lot of the longer forms, like I'll use the soft version to be clear, его, ему, right, for masculine adjectives, they look a lot like the pronouns, which we're going to review here today. Right, so essentially you had these competing forms, and originally for short forms you had a full set of case endings, and they look just like the noun endings, right? What we today think of as noun endings. Eventually, Russia was only using the nominative forms of these short form adjectives, right? So you had only the nominative forms left because they were only used in the predicate adjective position, right? So if you said things like he is young, right, that he is the subject, is the linking verb, young is a predicate adjective. That's the only place anymore, usually, where Russians used short form adjectives. And since the predicate adjective simply points back to the subject, right, of course it's going to be only in the nominative case. So that helps explain why these other case forms just completely disappeared. Again, for the most part, there are very weird exceptions, maybe, and we shouldn't get into it. Okay, so anyway, more recently, it basically works out that you only see a very limited number of adjectives used ever in the short form. Right now, again, if you're reading Russian, it really depends on the author. You may see other forms certainly used in their short form, especially in sort of formal Russian, but that doesn't really need to bother us right now, right? That's something you should certainly watch for passively. But in terms of speaking the language, we really only need to worry about short forms in a very limited number of adjectives anymore. We saw all the major ones last year. You may go back and review that if you like. Today we're mostly concerned with just reviewing how the forms work, right? Just how do the endings work. Okay, so again, for today, remember that we can only use these in that predicate position. He is young. She is uh, busy or whatever. Okay, so let's see a few examples. Живой, okay, there's the long form adjective meaning alive. And then we get the short forms, right? Жив, жива, жива, живый. And if you look at those forms quickly, you can see that those are, in fact, noun endings, right? There's really nothing weird about them. We're just using these noun endings for these rather peculiar adjectival forms. Свободный, okay, here we would end up with свободн in the masculine. Okay, sounds like we need a mobile vowel to break up that cluster, and that's what we get, right? Свободен is your masculine form. Свободна, свободна, свободный, right? The mobile vowel drops out when we have an ending. Finally, some short form adjectives don't really have long forms at all anymore, and one of those, a very common one, is rad, meaning glad or happy, right? For example, я рад means I'm happy, right? Rad, rada, rada, rady. And finally, больной, there's an in-stressed adjective, right? We get болен, больна, больно, больны, right? And you see how the in-stress is carrying over here in these short forms as well. Now, again, keep in mind that there are some adjectives in Russian that don't have any short form, period. And that includes all adjectives in ski, like even Ruski, right? So keep that in mind. Some adjectives have no short form whatsoever. Others, as we said, historically, especially if you reach back maybe 100 years, 200 years, or even more recently to sort of formal prose or whatever, then you may see any number of adjectives appearing in the short form. But for our purposes, we're really worried about a very limited number, the ones that we saw last year. And I'm sure you probably remember most of them. They're fairly common. Okay, so let's just fill in a few blanks here. Let's take молодой, right, meaning young. Okay, we want to say Pushkin is here so young, right? Here in this picture, Pushkin is so young. Okay, we have a predicate adjective, right? Pushkin is young. Okay, so if the adjective we're using happens to have short forms, then this is where they would be usually preferred, right? So Pushkin здесь так молод. Он так молод. Right, we're just lopping off the long ending. Ему всего 15 лет. Он учится в лицее. Right, he's only 15 years. To him are only, or in total, 15 years. He's studying at the лицее. Number two, занятый, meaning occupied or busy. You can also use this of seats, right, if a seat is taken. Весь зал blank слушателями. Okay, the entire hall, this room is occupied by or taken up by listeners. Okay, zal is our subject. We need masculine, занят. Весь зал занят слушателями. Каждое место в зале blank. Okay, now we're talking about each seat, each place, место, neuter, we're going to get занято. Каждое место занято. Number three, нужный. Okay, here's a really useful one. Remember that word means something like necessary, and we can use it to talk about the things we need. We practiced that a lot last year, right? Like, for example, компьютер мне нужен, right? The computer to me is necessary, right? I need a computer. Okay, Пушкин держит бумагу с текстом стихотворений, но она ему, по-видимому, не blank. So Pushkin is holding a piece of paper with the text of his poems, his poetry, but the paper, okay, now watch that она is feminine, right? So even though we're talking about a thing, we need, of course, feminine agreement in the Russian. Она ему не нужна. Она ему не нужна, по-видимому, right? По-видимому means apparently. Number four, уверенный, certain. Державин blank, что перед ним стоит великий поэт. Or Державин is certain that in front of him stands a great poet. Okay, so Державин is certain. We need masculine. Уверен. Он уверен. И он, конечно, прав. And of course, he's correct. Now, by the way, прав, there's another short form, right? We haven't used it in this exercise, but прав means correct, right? He is correct. The feminine would be права, right? Она права would mean she is correct. Okay, number five, согласный, meaning in agreement, essentially, right? Публика, наверное, blank с Державиным, right? The public is probably in agreement with Державин. Okay, публика, feminine, согласна. Публика согласна с Державиным. Этот молодой человек гений, right? This young man is a genius. Number 6, довольный, meaning satisfied. Все blank и счастливы. Okay, we actually have two short forms here, right? Everyone is satisfied, happy, and happy, right? I mean, slight difference in meaning, although they're somewhat close, right? I mean, well, довольный means more like satisfied. Okay, все довольны, right? Довольны, just right? Get rid of the и краткое. Все довольны и счастливы. Pushkin сам blank, right? So he's also satisfied. Он сам доволен. Он доволен собой. He's satisfied with himself, instrumental. И очень счастлив. Okay, so there's a quick review of short form adjectives. Let's move now to pronouns. And again, we really have to assume that you're more or less familiar with these from last year, right? We obviously can't spend 3 days now reviewing pronouns. We spent a lot of time on that last year. So be sure and go over this table. This kind of thing, these little pronoun forms are, of course, cropping up constantly, right? So this is the kind of thing, the words may be small, but you want to definitely be familiar with this table. So anyway, look over the table, right? And let's just fill in a few blanks, right? Actually, look at the table quickly. Remember that we have two interrogative pronouns, which also have a full set of case forms, right? What and who, right? Что and кто, right? So if we're asking something like in the instrumental, like чем ты пишешь, with what are you writing, right? Well, we would use чем, we would need the instrumental form of что, and then we would answer that чем question, presumably using an instrumental, right? The grammar, the case used in the answer will mirror that in the question. Or if we want to say, with whom did you go to the theater? С кем, right? С кем ты ходил в театр, right? Okay, well, of course, we would answer that question with another phrase plus the instrumental. Okay, so we have first here the first and second person pronouns and then the third person pronouns. Remember, for the third person pronouns, right, which typically begin with a vowel, we have a special in form, right? A special form in the white columns there that the forms begin with in, and those must be used after prepositions, right? So let's go back to that example. With whom did you go to the theater? You wouldn't say s im, right? Meaning with him. You would say с ним, right? With him, с ней, с ними, etc. By the way, a little fun fact, that in is not something that Russian cooked up for any particular reason. That goes all the way back to sort of Proto-Slavic, Balto-Slavic, right? A very long time ago when the most prepositions themselves ended with an N, right? So if I recall, the form of sa was something more like sun, right? And actually that N gradually dropped out of Slavic, right, in most positions. But in this one position, it was retained, and oddly enough, it became part of the pronoun, not part of the preposition. So, anything like that you see in language that may seem a bit odd, right, there's usually an explanation for it, and it's often quite fascinating. But moving right along. Okay, number one, дети сидят за столом. Кто еще с blank? Okay, so we're seeing a noun or two in the first sentence, and then we're following it up, and we're going to use, instead of the noun, we're going to substitute a pronoun, right? So the children are sitting literally behind the table. They're at the table. Кто еще? Who else is with them, right? С ними, right? Дети is plural. That's a they, right? Children are a they. So we need кто еще с ними? Mama, da mama с ними. By the way, we're talking about the painting За завтраком by Zinaida Srebrekova, which is in the Tretyakovskaya Galleria in Moscow. Very nice painting, very colorful. Okay, number two, Mama подает суп. Mama is serving soup. Mom is serving soup. Okay, here we have a couple of nouns. Blank serves blank with love. Okay, I guess we want to say she is serving it, the soup, with love. Okay, Anna, right? Of course, Anna referring to mama. Подает. Okay, let's think about this soup. You know, substituting these pronouns often causes a lot of trouble for students. So let's think about this one example very carefully. It's kind of a two-step process, really, if you're being careful. Soup. Okay, what is that? Remember, like lesson 5 back in the day, right? We would ask what pronoun would we use to refer to soup? Well, that's a masculine noun. So the pronoun, and hopefully you understand this perfectly well by now, would be on, right? Soup is masculine grammatically, and so we would say that soup is a he, so to speak. It is on. Okay, now the next step is the question, what case form do you need of on, right? We're working with on, but the question now is what case do we need? And for that, we have to look at the context, right? Here, mom is serving it, right? So it is the direct object. We need the accusative of on. Okay, so refer to the table if you need to while you're studying, right? And we see the accusative is его. Okay, so our work is done. Она подает его с любовью. Number 3, мама любит своих детей. Mom loves her kids. Blank, blank, тоже любит. And note the plural verb. Okay, it looks like we need to say they also love her. They, her, also love. Right? They love her back. Okay. Well, they, that's your subject. That's они, right, for дети. And her, again, well, mama is она. We need the accusative. That's ее. Они ее тоже любят. Number 4, дочь сидит рядом с сыном. Okay, the daughter is sitting next to the son, right, from the mom's point of view, right? Okay, let's see. Let's just substitute pronouns. She is sitting next to him, or literally in a row with him. Она сидит рядом с ним. Okay, there's the in right after the preposition с ним. Number 5, the children are looking at us, and blank, and we see the смотрим, right? We are looking at blank. Okay, they're looking at us, we're looking at them. Would make sense here. Дети смотрят на нас, и мы, right? We are the subject. Мы смотрим на. Okay, let's think. Дети, that's a third plural, right? It's a they. In Russian, that's going to be они. Now we're looking at them. We need an accusative after na. Okay, that's going to be них. Right, again, we need, because of the preposition na, we need the form with the in. Мы смотрим на них. Number 6, soup вкусный. The soup is tasty. In blank is cabbage. Okay, I don't know that for a fact. I'm just guessing, right? Okay, so in the soup, in it. Okay, again, we're working with on. We need prepositional here after the v. В нем. В нем есть капуста. Again, we need the form with the in because it's after a preposition. Number 7, на столе скатерть. On the table is a tablecloth. On it, the tablecloth, are plates. Okay, скатерть, right? That's an ambiguous form, but we're told here that it is an e noun, right? So it's feminine. Okay, so on it, we're working with она because it's feminine. We need prepositional на ней. На ней тарелки. Number 8, мальчик смотрит в стакан. The boy up at the top is looking into his glass. He looks like a rather naughty boy, right? He's not sitting properly at the table. Okay. Now that probably tells us, of course, that he's a lot smarter and more creative than his two siblings who are sort of staring into the camera, so to speak. But enough speculation. Okay. Anyway, the boy is looking into his cup. Okay, let's just substitute pronouns. He is looking into it. Okay, he is obvious. On, смотрит, в. And now стакан is also going to be on, right? It's a masculine, but we need into, right? We have a куда expression with the accusative. The accusative of on is его, but here, because of the preposition, we need the in form, right? So в него is the answer. Он смотрит в него. Number 9, суп едят ложкой. They eat soup with a spoon. Now remember, this could, I guess, mean the kids in the painting, but probably we would read it as meaning people in general, right? It's one of those third plural expressions to tell what, quote unquote, they do, what people do, right? Well, so in English, we'd say something like, we eat soup with a spoon, or one eats soup with a spoon. Суп едят ложкой. Blank they also eat ice cream, blank, right? Okay, blank, it seems like, again, we need an instrumental, right, to substitute for with a spoon. Okay, ложка is feminine. We're going to work with она. We need the instrumental, ей. Ей также едят мороженое, right? So meaning with it, they also eat ice cream. Number 10, детям нравится суп. Soup is pleasing to the kids. The kids like soup. Okay, let's say to them it is pleasing, right? Just substituting pronouns. Now remember with this verb nravится, it's a bit tricky for English, right? In English we say the kids like soup, but in Russian the grammar is sort of turned on its head. The soup is pleasing to the kids in the dative. Okay, what would be the pronoun for the dative plural? Детям. Им, right? Им, and then soup will be our subject. On. On им нравится, right? It is pleasing to them. Okay, a rather crude but very funny and alas very true proverb. Тронешь говно, оно и завоняет. Right? If you touch shit, it will begin to stink. Okay, think about it. Okay, anyway. Okay, number 105C. It basically means, right, don't get into trouble, right? Don't just let a sleeping dog lie. It's almost like that. Okay, number 1, let's just fill in a few forms for these pronouns. Я. Приходи к blank в гости. Okay, that's going to be, we need dative after ко мне. Ко мне. What is that о doing there? Well, if you look over a lot of the я forms, at least, well, the dative and the prepositional and the instrumental, мне, мной, that mn cluster is always going to be broken up by a mobile vowel, right? So if our preposition ends in a consonant, we're going to need to add a mobile vowel in front of those mn forms. Приходи ко мне в гости, right? Come pay me a visit. У blank весело, at me, meaning at my place, things are fun, things are very merry. У меня весело, right? Genitive. Number 2, не поедешь с blank на дачу завтра? Will you not go with us to the dacha tomorrow? Okay, we need instrumental. Не поедешь с нами на дачу завтра? Number 3, ты, я расскажу blank, что о blank говорят. Okay, I'll tell you what about you they are saying, right? It sounds like we have some gossip. Okay, what case do we need first? Я расскажу blank. We need a dative, right? I will tell to you, right? Я расскажу тебе, что and takes the prepositional, что о тебе говорят. Number 4, on. Мы написали blank и получили от blank ответ. Okay, we wrote to him, right? We need an indirect object, right? That's going to be dative. Мы написали ему и получили от blank ответ. And we received a response from him. What takes the genitive? От него. Okay, again, we need the form with the N after the preposition. От него. Она, мы идем в гости. Okay, again, we're going to visit this woman. Мы идем к ней в гости. Мы несем blank цветы. Okay, we're on our way to see her, right? Идем. And we are carrying flowers or taking flowers to her, for her. That's going to be dative as well. Yay. Number 6, они. Right? U blank is a big problem, but I blank will help. Okay, we know that needs the genitive, right? У них. Again, watch the N. So at them is a big problem. They have a big problem. Но я помогу. Okay, what case does the verb помогать, помочь, right, the helping verb take? Dative, right? We know that, hopefully. So we need the dative of они, and that is им. Я им помогу. Okay, on page 21, we have quite a bit of grammar, and it's in one sense, it's not really that hard, right? We sort of get a lot of bang for our buck here, right? We review the question words, and then we see three very important forms that we derive straight from the question words. So you can get a lot of mileage out of just looking at these charts a little bit. Okay, so what words are we dealing with? First, the question words, right, which just are simply used to begin a question. We know that. Then we get negative forms by adding ni in front of the question word, right? And then we get two kinds of indefinite, right, by adding to and нибудь. Okay, and that gives us a word, an indefinite, meaning someone, something, somewhere, and so forth. Okay, so let's look these over. Let's just read through the forms. Что, кто, когда, как, какой, чей, где, куда, откуда, почему. Okay, hopefully you know those words from last year. We used those words all year. So review those. We assume you know what those words mean. Okay, now somewhat trickier. First, the negative forms. Okay, we're just adding ni in front of the question word, right? Very mechanically, not really much to think about here. And we get the negative equivalent of the question word, right? So if что is talking about a thing, like to ask what, what thing, well, ничто is no thing, nothing. Кто becomes никто, no one, никогда, никак, никакой, ничей, нигде, никуда, ниоткуда. Okay? Now, if you look down at the footnote, we recall from last year we discussed how the form ничто, which would be the nominative form in theory, almost never is heard anymore. The genitive has taken over. So you almost only hear ничего, ничего, whether that be in the nominative or the genitive. Okay, so you may remember that from last year. Why is that? Well, in a nutshell, it's because the genitive is so associated with negation, right? So that helps explain why that's the case. Okay, finally, indefinites, right? We had то and нибудь, что-то, кто-то, когда-то, and then что-нибудь, кто-нибудь, когда-нибудь. Note the hyphens here. Okay, so those can translate to something, someone, sometime, etc. Okay, we'll talk about the difference here in a moment. Let's look first at negatives, right? Remember that Russian has double negation, right? So if you negate a verb and then you're going to add some of these, well, in English we would have something like anything, right? We would start using any words to avoid double negation, which formal English doesn't like. Okay, but in Russian we do need double negation. We need every word like that to be a negative form. So we get examples like я ничего никогда не делаю, right? We have a negated verb, I don't do, and then nothing, never. I don't never do nothing, right? Я ничего никогда не делаю. Or я ни с кем не разговариваю. Now there we have a preposition, right? And note how the preposition is breaking up that ni form, right? We get the ni, then we get sa, and then кем, right? So that would happen with the negative forms of что and кто, right? The ones that have various case forms, and well, they're basically pronouns, right? The preposition breaks those up. Okay, я ни с кем не разговариваю. I don't talk with anyone. Okay, so hopefully, again, that's fairly familiar from last year. What about the indefinites? Well, what's the difference between to indefinites and нибудь? Well, one rather vague way to think about this, but that is reasonably useful, is that нибудь forms are more indefinite than to. To we usually use when we know something exists, we're just not clear on the details, or we're choosing not to specify the details, right? But we know that there is this thing, and right, we're just vague about the specifics. Нибудь usually implies that the thing it doesn't even exist for sure, right? It's something off in the future, or we're asking questions and we don't know if this thing exists at all, right? Let alone the specifics. Okay, so those guidelines, this point of existence, is a pretty useful guideline. Okay, so since to forms sorry, when nibuch forms are used, it basically means that the very existence of the thing is in doubt. Okay, what does that mean in practice? It means that nibuch forms are much more common in questions and future tense examples, right? Because if we're asking about something, then often we have no idea whether or not it exists. Like, did you bring me something from Russia, right? We don't know. That's the point of the question. Or if we're telling someone, like, bring me something from Russia, well, we have that's a command. We're talking about something in the future, right? It hasn't materialized. We don't know that it even exists or will exist, etc. So we use nibuch in those very open-ended, sort of radically indefinite situations. Now, Tor, on the other hand, we know the thing exists, right? We just, again, we're not clear or we're not specifying concerning the specifics. So we get Tor a lot in present tense or past tense examples, right? In situations where we could or do know that this thing exists. Okay, so two simple examples. This is a rather tricky topic, but it's an important one. Он купил что-нибудь? Did he buy something? Okay, right, a question, right? We don't know. The whole point is we don't know if this thing exists at all, so we use нибудь. Okay, and we get confirmation, yes, he did buy something. Okay, but again, we're not specifying what exactly, right? So in this case, we do know that he bought something. We don't know the specifics, or we're choosing not to talk about them. We use то. Да, он что-то купил. Okay, let's fill in a few of these to describe the painting Всюду жизнь, life is everywhere. And very interesting painting. Let's learn a little bit about it, about what's happening here. Okay, здесь мы видим поезд, и в нем blank людей. Here we see a train, and in it, some kind of people, right? Some people, right? People of some kind, right? We're not really sure what kind exactly yet. Okay, so we need a form of какой, right, to talk about what kind of, and we need an indefinite, right? Now we see these people, we know that they're people of one kind or another, right? We know they exist, so we're going to use то, right? И в нем каких-то людей, right? Мы видим каких-то людей в этом поезде. Number two, somewhere. Что это за поезд? What kind of a train is this? Эти люди blank едут, right? Are they on their way to somewhere? Okay, we need a form of куда. Okay, and we're asking a question, right? Maybe they're not going anywhere, right? Maybe Lord knows what they could be doing. Okay, эти люди куда-нибудь едут, right? So we use нибудь. We're not sure they're going anywhere. That's the point of the question. Number three, somewhere, again. Да, они blank едут. Okay, now we get confirmation. Yes, they are indeed going somewhere. So we need куда-то, right? Да, они куда-то едут. Yes, they are on their way somewhere. А куда именно? But to where specifically, right? Where exactly? Number four, for some reason they are on their way to prison, or I think more precisely, they're probably headed out to Siberia somewhere to a labor camp, which would be called katorga. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, but basically, yeah, they're heading to prison. They're convicts. Они, okay, for some reason. Okay, well, let's think. We need an indefinite. Does a reason exist? Yeah, presumably there is some reason. It may be unjust or whatever, but there's some reason they're in this train car going to prison. So, почему-то. Почему-то они едут в тюрьму. Number five, something. Кажется, что они blank плохое сделали. It seems that they did something bad. They've done something bad, we assume, if they're going to prison, right? Кажется, что они что-то плохое сделали. Okay, past tense verb. Again, we're assuming they must have done something, but we're not sure what, right? So, что-то плохое. Number six, some kind of, right? They have committed some kind of crime, right? Они совершили какое-то преступление, right? I don't think we've recalled yet that какой is adjectival, right? So we need какое to agree with the neuter преступление. Они совершили какое-то преступление. They have committed some kind of crime, right? Now, why то? Again, we assume they have committed a crime. It actually exists, but we don't know the specifics, so we use то. Number 7, what kind of people are these? What kind of life do they have? Right? Okay, so here we're just asking a question, right? We're back to the question word. Какие это люди? Какая у них жизнь? Remember, жизнь is a feminine e noun, right? Какая у них жизнь? Number 8, some kind of. Okay, we're back to an indefinite. Мужчина с бородой, the man with the beard, is some kind of peasant. Okay, so we're sort of speculating here. I mean, we're looking at him. We're kind of he has a beard. He looks kind of like a peasant. So we're sort of saying, well, he's a peasant of some kind, right? More or less. Какой-то крестьянин. Крестьянин. Он какой-то крестьянин. Number 9, другой интеллигент. The second man is a member of the intelligentsia, right? He's an educated person. He studied somewhere. He went to college somewhere. Он где-то учился. Он где-то учился. Okay, we're guessing that because he looks rather refined. I think he has a little mustache or whatever. He certainly doesn't look like a peasant. Okay, anyway, number 9. 10. For some reason, третий, то есть третий человек, the third man, is a husband and father. Его почему-то арестовали, right? For some reason, we don't know why, but we assume there was some reason. Again, it might have been unjust, but I guess the police had their reasons. They arrested him. Okay, so we see basically here all kinds of different social classes kind of thrown in together, right? A peasant, an intelligent, and then here just some kind of ordinary father. He looks a little bit uncouth. He may be just kind of an ordinary worker. So that's kind of the point here is we have different social types and levels of education, levels of wealth, and they're all in the same boat here, in the same train. That's part of the point of this painting, I think, right? It's a commentary on Russian society and injustices in the Russian Empire. Incarceration, right? Okay, and just the whole penal penal servitude, right? The whole Siberian labor camp system. Okay, anyway, его жена, his wife, see the woman there, его жена, почему somehow, как-то, somehow she made up her mind to, or decided to head out with her husband to make the journey. We could say ехать, right? We're stressing here the process of this long journey. Она решилась ехать с мужем в Сибирь. Она как-то решилась ехать с мужем в Сибирь. Okay, so by the way, this was a kind of a pattern of behavior. A lot of Russian women whose husbands were sent to Siberia to labor camps, they would follow them, and this model of behavior really began with the wives of the Decembrists, right? When the Decembrist revolt was put down, a lot of these prominent revolutionaries were shipped off, and the Decembrist wives who followed them off to Siberia became kind of a cause célèbre, right? They were widely admired for their self-sacrifice and really held up as kind of a paragon of I don't know what, loving devotion or whatever. Okay, we'll talk more about them at some point later. I think when we read a Pushkin poem, I'll tell you a curious, one Decembrist wife whom Pushkin knew. Anyway, more on that some other time. Okay, 12, somewhere. Четвертый мужчина смотрит. So a fourth man, see him back there, is looking somewhere into the other window, literally. Okay, so in Russian, you look into a window. It's the куда phrase. Right? So четвертый мужчина смотрит куда-то. Number 13. Кажется, что этих бедных людей нет blank. It seems that these poor people have nothing. У них нет non-existence, we get the genitive, we get ничего. У них нет ничего. У них нет, okay, they have no kind of life. Okay, well, how would we ask, what kind of life? That would be какая жизнь. Now we need to negate that, right? And we need to say никакая жизнь, right? No kind of life. Here we need the genitive because we have, again, a non-existence expression. They don't have, right? Нет plus the genitive. У них нет никакой жизни. У них нет никакой жизни. And again, no kind of happiness, right? Никакого счастья. Счастье is a soft neuter. 15, somehow. Но им надо somehow как-нибудь искать смысл в жизни. Right? Now, here in this example, you could, I guess, conceivably use either. If we say как-нибудь, it sounds a little bit more, just more open-ended, right? Sort of more desperate. And I think that sounds a bit more appropriate here, right? They have nothing, it would seem, no happiness, no kind of life, and they're sort of at a dead end. They have to find some way, right? We have no idea what that might look like to search for meaning in life. Okay, number 16, from somewhere. From somewhere прилетели голуби, right? Pigeons have flown up from somewhere, right? They've flown in from somewhere. Okay, откуда-то, right? Откуда-то, right? We're from, откуда, we get an indefinite. Откуда-то прилетели голуби. Ребенок их кормит. The child is feeding the pigeons. Okay, number 17, can someone interpret the painting? Okay, if I'm asking a question, again, we're going to expect нибудь, right? Can anyone interpret the painting? Well, I don't know, right? Maybe not, right? So we're going to use нибудь. Кто-нибудь может проинтерпретировать картину? Okay, well, I'll interpret it for you, right? The basic point is that, right, we have kind of oppressed people of different stations. We have the wife who's accompanying her husband, and then we have this obviously innocent child who is in a prison train, basically. So off to a very unfortunate start in life, and clearly, a case of terrible injustice. And yet these people are trying to find some joy in what meager life they have, right? And the idea in the title, right, life is everywhere, right? Well, there's life in the prison car. There's these people are alive. They're human beings, and they're finding life right here in the form of these pigeons, right? Maybe a moment of levity or kind of unexpected happiness amidst this bleak predicament. Okay, one more thing today. Let's review possessive pronouns and other special modifiers. Okay, so these are words like my, your, her, his, etc. Right? Those are acting adjectively. They're modifying nouns like my book, your book, right? And in most cases, they're agreeing with the noun they modify, right? So if we look over the tables, we see that moj, tvoj, and svoj all work alike, right? So here we're just saying moj, but those three words act the same in terms of their forms. And then we have nash and vash, which also work the same. So again, review those forms. If you look them over, you'll see they're, for the most part, they look like soft adjectival endings, right? So they're not really too tricky. Okay, now remember, here's an important point of grammar, right? The third person forms like его, right, meaning his, ее, meaning hers, and ich, meaning theirs, never, ever, ever change, right? So they don't have a full set of case forms. So if you want to say his book, that would be его книга. But if we choose a masculine noun like computer, that would be его компьютер, right? The его doesn't change. Okay, so look over a few examples. Это ее кошка. Я смотрю на нее. Okay, there's that ее is the pronoun referring to the cat, right? So the pronoun can change, and that can include adding an n, right? Just the basic pronoun form. I'm looking at it, meaning the cat, right? We just reviewed why we need to add an n there. But again, and this is what trips people up, if you're using ее or его not as an actual standalone pronoun, but as the possessive, meaning basically, here's how to put it. If его means his, that его will never change, ever. And that includes adding an n. If a ее is being used in the sense of her, right, as the possessive, again, it will never, ever change. And that's what we see here. Я смотрю на ее кошку. I'm looking at her cat, right? We're not saying here that I'm looking at her, meaning the cat, right? In which case we would say на нее, but rather I'm looking at her cat, right? This yiyo means her, and so we're not adding an N there. Okay, you may remember that from last year. Look that over and think about it for a moment. It's a reasonably common mistake. Okay, finally, how does the reflexive possessive form svoi, how does that work? Let's review that quickly. It refers back to the subject of the sentence, right? So the subject has to be the owner of the thing we're talking about for us to be able to use svoi. For example, on любит свою кошку, meaning he loves his own cat. Okay, so usually if we're talking about first or second person, right? Well, of course we could use moi or tvoi or whatever, right? Now in those cases, svoi is usually preferred, but it's not really a big deal because again, you could use if you say something like "I love my cat," or you know, I brought my dictionary. I don't know. I'm thinking of silly examples, right? We could use moi or svoi. They're sort of interchangeable, although svoi would usually be preferred. Okay, but here's the important part, and you may remember from last year. In the third person, svoi is mandatory if the subject is talking, right, we're talking about the subject's own thing, right, the subject's thing. Okay, this is, we used the example last year of the whole scandal thing. If we say in English, he loves his wife, right, or Bob loves his wife. Well, whose wife is that he's loving? Well, when you think about it, the English is actually ambiguous, right? That his could be his own wife or some other man's wife, right? So remember, we kind of asked this question for humor's sake, right? Do we have a scandal or not? Well, we actually don't know in English. If we really think about it, we assume that it's his own wife. Okay, now in Russian, there is no such ambiguity. If we say, он любит его жену, that means he loves someone else's wife, some other man's wife. If we say он любит свою жену, then that means he loves his own wife, right? Okay, so you have to be careful about that distinction in the third person. For example, here we say он любит его кошку. Okay, so we see how to say he loves his own cat, and we see how to see he loves some other guy's cat. Okay, that sounds a little bit creepy to me, right? But anyway, there's the distinction. Okay. Okay, so let's throw in a few of these forms and call it a day. Okay, who are your favorite Russian authors? Okay, we have a nominative plural. Pretty easy. Кто твои любимые русские писатели? Number two, why don't I tell about my favorite poet? Okay, we're talking about a poet, right? That's masculine. Давай я расскажу о моем любимом поэте. Okay. Number three, твой. Есть книги Пушкина в библиотеке, right? Are there books of Pushkin in your library? Well, of course. I mean, I'm a little bit insulted by the mere question, right? Of course. And actually, they're right up there. See Pushkin, those red books. Those are my Pushkin volumes. Anyway, есть книги Пушкина в... Okay, библиотека is feminine, so this will be в твоей, right? We need the feminine prepositional. В твоей библиотеке. Number four, sometimes they say, or in the sense that sometimes people say that Pushkin is our everything. You hear that phrase sometimes in Russia. Иногда говорят, что Pushkin наше все, right? Neuter singular. Number five, many people know his poems by heart. Okay, again, его, we're using this in the possessive sense, his poems. So this is a no-brainer. This is not going to change ever. Многие знают его стихи наизусть. Number six, Pushkin really loved his wife. Pushkin очень любил свою жену. Unfortunately, other people also loved his wife. She was considered one of the great beauties of her age in Russia, and somehow Pushkin ended up with her. And it does seem that he did love her. She didn't. I shouldn't get into this. This is kind of a long story and a terrible scandal. As you may know, he ended up dying in a duel defending his wife's honor. I'll have to talk about that on some other occasion. But anyway, it does seem that he really did like her. She wasn't really much into his poetry. It seems that she really didn't understand poetry, appreciate it at all, which may have been good for him. I don't know. But she really wasn't particularly impressed by his poetry. She liked going to balls and things like this, and he was basically broke after marrying her because he was trying to keep up her lifestyle as one of these, prominent ladies in high society in Petersburg, right, with all of her clothes and her carriages and all this stuff. Okay, it's a long story, and it's a very sad one. I have to say the final few years of Pushkin's life were not very happy. Okay, number 7, Yuyua. Have you seen her portrait? She was a beauty. Вы видели ее портрет? Она была красавица. Okay, and that's not just my opinion. Again, that was just kind of a universally acknowledged fact back in the day, right? Everyone thought she was beautiful. Okay, number 8. Другие, конечно, тоже любили his wife, right? Others also loved his wife, as I mentioned, right? They were flirting with her all the time, and she was flirting right back. Anyway, другие, конечно, тоже любили его жену, meaning Pushkin's wife, not the subject's wife, not these people's own wife, but rather his wife. Okay, Pushkin read their anonymous letters. Pushkin читал их анонимные письма. Again, that word ich in the sense of their will never ever change. Okay, so these anonymous letters started being sent around Petersburg, basically saying that Pushkin had been cuckolded, right? That his wife was cheating on him. And of course, when you're insulted like that, and even especially when your wife is insulted like that, you have to challenge the miscreant to a duel, and that's exactly what happened. Although it took months and months, the duel was broken off several times, and finally, after further provocations, it took place, and Pushkin was shot and died. I think around 2 days later. It took him a while to die of his gunshot wound. Really, again, really quite horrible. Number 10, свой. Он умер на дуэли, защищая честь blank wife in the genitive. He died in a duel, defending the honor of his wife. Okay, and note again, this is his own wife, right? Pushkin's own wife, so we need свой. Он умер на дуэли, защищая честь своей жены, right? Genitive, feminine. Okay, that's enough for today. Until next time, до свидания.